Ghost hunter wanted to remain one night in graveyard tied to tombstone. In 1920, there was a grand scientific experiment to find out whether ghosts were real. Thousands of people around the world applied for the opportunity to aid science. All these people had to do was spend one entire night in a cemetery, chained to a bed, then tell their stories. Today, I'm talking about the Graveyard Sleeping Contest of 1920. Would you sleep in a cemetery for science or cash? Howdy, I'm Brian. Welcome to my channel where I share animated Oklahoma stories. But today's story actually spans the globe. I'm outside what was once the Sug Theater in Chickasha, Oklahoma, which was built back in 1913 of fireproof materials. 100 years ago, as belief in spiritualism, mediums, and psychics was growing, theaters put out a call for brave souls who would test whether ghosts were real. It was actually a promotion for a new D.W. Griffith film, which featured a couple graveyard scenes and a ghostly visitation. The idea was that the local theater manager questioned the inclusion of ghosts in the new film and wanted to know for himself whether ghosts were real, so much so that he was willing to put up cash to find out. The promotional ads stressed that this was a bona fide offer done in the interests of science, and that the scientific observer would be required to share his or her results. It was really a promotional campaign cooked up by C.L. Yearsley, and it was considered a phenomenal success with enormous results for such a small investment. Here's how the local paper described the rules. A bed with warm clothing will be provided among the graves. The scientific observer will be supplied with a gun, but he must be absolutely alone without the company of even a dog, and must furthermore be chained to the bed. He will sleep from 10 p.m. Tuesday night until 6 a.m. Wednesday morning, at which time a representative will release him and take down his experiences. The Sug Theater's ghost hunter was the proprietor of a local barber shop. My reason is that I want to do everything in my power to advance science. I only ask that I be provided with paper and pencil to take down my experiences, and that the chain be at least 4 yards long so as to allow free movement in case I am attacked. Ghost hunters were given paper and pencil, but no light. One paper explained the reason why. If no ghast appears, a light won't be necessary. If a ghost does appear, the luminosity of his person will be sufficient. Ghosts have the reputation of always being lit up. Theaters had great freedom in how they carried out their experiment. The Sug had only one ghost hunter, while other theaters had as many as 3 or 4, spread out over multiple cemeteries. The cash prizes ranged from $5 to $100, with amounts often based on race and gender. The Sug accepted the very first qualified applicant, while other theaters had hundreds or even thousands of applicants and chose ghost hunters by random draw or a selection committee. In some places, it became a real contest. Most theaters prohibited professional spiritualist mediums from participating because they already had their minds made up. A few theaters barred former soldiers because they were too darn brave. It would be too easy. Some theaters provided a firearm, while others suggested that you bring your own to protect yourself from human interlopers and pranksters. In a few locations, shots were fired. Some ghost hunters had their stories published in the newspapers, while others made personal appearances at the theater and told their stories to live audiences. At least one theater put their cot on display in the front of the theater. Some theaters advertised a torchlit procession to escort the sleeper to his rest, while others attempted to keep the location of the cemeteries a secret and had to use deception to get away from following crowds. Looky-loos showed up at cemeteries hoping to get a glimpse of the goings-on. Okay, people, are you ready for the startling results of the Sug Theater's spirit investigation? Brace yourself. Scientific experiment proves no ghosts. The experiment made Tuesday night in the interest of science to prove no ghosts, conducted by the Sug Theater in conjunction with the D.W. Griffith special picture, The Greatest Question, tends to show absolutely nothing unusual happens in a cemetery. The idea of ghosts is simply a superstition with which people use to frighten little children. Well, there you have it, scientific proof that ghosts do not exist. Of course, results will vary. I don't have the results from most of the locations, but I'll share some of the interesting details I did find. The ghost hunters down in El Paso actually had conversations with spirits. The white woman met a blackness, a form 8 feet tall, which told her she would succeed if she continued working hard. The white man heard wondrous music beyond human description and was visited by both the police and spirits. He told the police he was doing science, and they left. The spirits told him who the next president would be. The black man heard noises like skeletons playing on a xylophone. The black woman said the ghosts didn't bother her because she minded her own business. In several locations, the experiment was prevented by local officials objecting to this bed and chain event. The mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, threatened to arrest anyone sleeping in a cemetery, and in Concordia, Kansas, the mayor threatened to arrest both the ghost hunter and the theater manager. In Iowa City, Iowa, a female art student was prevented from sleeping in a cemetery in a coffin box by her university dean. The Topeka, Kansas sleeper said he'd rather face all the ghosts in all the graveyards of the world than give a talk to a live theater audience. In Mangum, Oklahoma, the sleeper somehow managed to escape his shackles in the middle of the night. He said he didn't see anything scary, but he heard aplenty. Mysteriously, the shackles were found still locked. Yukon, Oklahoma may have had the cheapest prize with a flat $5 reward to anyone willing to do it. Fairmount, West Virginia had a one-legged ghost hunter who refused to talk. Dayton, Ohio had a vaudevillian escape artist. Not only was he chained to the bed, but he was also wearing a straitjacket. Dayton also offered to increase the prize if the night was moonless and dark. In Washington Courthouse, Ohio, the sleeper had to use his revolver to frighten off a group of local boys. A few Australian locations filmed the locking and unlocking of the graveyard sleepers and showed those films at the theaters. In Adelaide, South Australia, nearly 3,000 people applied. In Perth, Western Australia, they had 540 applicants. The ghost hunter saw something that frightened him so badly, he tried frantically to escape before falling and hitting his head on a tree. In Hobart, Tasmania, one of the apparitions he saw put a cold, clammy hand on his forehead. He fainted from that. He later collapsed when recounting his ordeal. In Launceston, Tasmania, the sleeper here was visited by multiple spirits. One was dripping and gliding, another was dancing with rage. He hid his head under the blankets until they went as mysteriously as they came. In Newcastle, New South Wales, the sleeper fired his revolver at a gruesome white form approaching him. When the theater manager heard this, his response was, "Oh, that must be the dead cow there across the road." In Mount Pleasant, Iowa, another cow, but this time they decided not to give the sleeper a gun. Probably saved the cow's life. New Orleans had one of the biggest responses with 1,500 applicants, and the increase in attendance was so great that they had to use police reserves for a full week to control the crowds at the theater, despite it raining heavily all week. 3 applicants were chosen, and they had to use tents due to the rain. The white man said that his lantern went out suspiciously whenever he fell asleep, despite working properly and being well shielded from the wind. He also lost a sock. The white woman found a bouquet of flowers at the foot of her bed when she awoke. The black man heard noises like a skeleton playing the xylophone. Déjà vu. But he explained it away as the noise of the trees. New Orleans papers really pushed the stunt with detailed stories and cartoons. It was here a reporter came up with the name, the Graveyard Sleeping Contest. The graveyard sleeper in Viroqua, Wisconsin, a man called Dr. Butt, slept on the ground in a buffalo robe, but he fled the cemetery ahead of schedule with scratches on his neck. This, he said, was caused by a bony hand grabbing him by the throat and throwing him violently to the ground. He was forced to abandon the resting spot 3 times because of a white ghostly figure in the bushes. There were strange sounds coming from the trees, and he fled about 4:30 in the morning after something cold and clammy had clutched at his heart, and a chilly, deadening sensation began to spread from there over his body. Dr. Butt was widely known in town, and everyone wanted to know more about what happened. On stage at the theater, Butt went into further detail. He explained to audiences that the bony hand which had clutched his throat was the bare fork on a low-hanging limb. The white ghostly shape that haunted him was a straying calf. Nocturnal sparrows caused the trembling and shakings of the trees, and his final experience had come through rolling into a puddle of water. His haste to get home was caused by his anxiety to get dry clothing. As you can see, the graveyard sleepers of 1920 got mixed results, but the story doesn't end in 1920. A promotion this popular would inevitably come back. The graveyard sleeper idea was revived in the 1930s by a man calling himself Dr. Zandu. I have no idea what his real name was. He wanted people who would sleep in a graveyard to test spirit forces and then appear at his midnight seance and ghost show. Everyone who applied had to be over 21, open-minded, willing to spend an entire night in the cemetery, and be willing to share their experiences. They would be given a warm blanket and receive either $10 or $25. All the Zandu ads I've been able to find were in the southern half of the country: Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. The name of Zandu's show was not very original. Can you spot the theme here? While most of these seance and spook shows were gone by the 1940s, Dr. Zandu's show with its graveyard sleeper ad kept appearing for years, took some time off for World War II, and then returned with a new name in 1946, Spook Scandals. This new Spook Scandals used some of the same Zandu language in their ads, used the exact same ghost from previous Zandu ads, except now it was joined by scantily clad women in the graveyard. This new show also ran almost the exact same graveyard sleeper ad as Zandu had. This new show had sexotic glamour gals and screwball spooks. Apparently may have also had more action in it because at Lawton, Oklahoma, one female performer was injured by a blank cartridge. Just like Zandu appears to have copied the Seance and Spook Show idea, Spook Scandals was also a borrowed idea. Right this way, pull up a coffin and sit down. In 1944, there had been a very brief Broadway show called Spook Scandals with extreme macabre decor. The lobby was decorated with Halloween staples like a corpse, coffin, severed head. They played funeral music. The ushers were black-swathed figures who would show you to your seat with blood-red flashlights. That show's lasting legacy was the discovery of an actress who was featured screaming, fainting, lying in a coffin, and sexily slinking around a graveyard set. Mila Nurmi. A decade later, she was hosting movies on late-night TV as Vampira and appearing in Plan 9 from Outer Space, slinking around a graveyard set. Is that slinking? Yeah, that may not be slinking. I might be wrong about that. Back to promotions for the later traveling Spook Scandals used terms like Merry Madhouse, spectacle of fright and frivolities, and horrific happenings from the hinges of Hades. They also made it clear that this was not a picture, lecture, or play. That's also something that Zandu did. I don't have much other detail on this traveling version of Spook Scandals, except it was described as a company of 10 people who flew around the country in their private twin-engine Beechcraft, and most of their shows I've identified took place in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana through the end of the 1940s. After Spook Scandals, the Graveyard Sleepers ad would be brought back again in 1951 to promote a traveling Monster Makers of Hollywood show at Texas locations. But instead of asking for people to spend the night in a cemetery to test spirit forces, now it was to test the spirit of Dracula, who would make a live appearance on stage with the other monsters. There are clues that these few shows may have been linked to the people behind Zandu and Spook Scandals. Again in 1965, the ad appeared under the title Graveyard Sleeper to promote Screamorama Horrorthon shows in Florida. These ads use Zandu's language of 21, open-minded, sincere, and willing. I wonder if Dr. Zandu retired to Florida, whoever he was. When I first discovered the Sug Theater ghost hunt, I was surprised to learn that so many theaters carried out the same experiment, especially when I found Australia. C.L. Yearsley, who devised the promotion, had previous experience with Australian publicity, so that actually made sense. I don't know if any non-English speaking countries had graveyard sleepers, as the majority of my sources are English-based. I'd be interested in finding out. I would be remiss in not saying something about the film that the stunt was promoting. The greatest question was D.W. Griffith's new film with Lillian Gish. D.W. Griffith was one of the most influential, pioneering filmmakers of the silent era, so much so that the Directors Guild named their top prize after him. The film was the story of a young girl who witnessed a murder, then years later, after becoming an orphan, gets a new family, which becomes poor. To do her part to support them, she gets a job working for the murderers. None of them recognize each other right away. Here's a couple snippets from a film review. This picture is certainly gripping, intensely gripping, but at the same time is not exactly pleasant entertainment. It seems too full of horror, of sordid things. There is sunshine in it, but the shadows are predominant. A mind at all sensitive is likely to revolt at the long, detailed action showing her at their mercy, showing her struck almost mad by their contemplated tortures of which and stabbing out her eyes are not the least. If you feel the urge to spend all night in a spooky place by yourself, might I suggest not doing that. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more cartoons like this, subscribe, like this video. It will help me out.